So good evening. I'm Councillor Lynn Doherty, the leader of West Berkshire Council and chairman of the executive. Welcome to this meeting. I'm being supported at this meeting by the deputy leader, Councillor Graham Bridgman. The other members of the executive present are Councillor Steve Arderwater, Dominic Bowick, Hilary Cole, Ross McKinnon, Richard Sumner, Joe Stewart and Howard Wollaston. You will also see members of the Shadow Executive and the leader of the Minority Green Party are in attendance. These members are entitled to speak and ask questions when invited to do so by myself. Other members of the council are also in attendance in the virtual waiting room and can ask questions on any items included on the agenda. They will do this by indicating electronically, and I will then invite them to be brought in from the virtual waiting room for their questions to be answered. Members who are not on the executive are not able to vote on any of the agenda items. There are also a number of officers in attendance, and they include Nick Carter, our Chief Executive, and the Executive Directors, John Ashworth, Joseph Holmes, and Andy Sharp. Shiraz Sheikh and Moira Fraser will be the legal advisors to the meeting. Sorry, Shiraz Sheikh, not Moira, will be the legal. Moira will be, actually it's Linda, sorry, I've got the wrong note here, it's Linda. Pye will be the clerk to the meeting. Apologies, Linda. I'm assisted by Linda Pye, the clerk to the meeting, and by Phil Rumans, who will be acting as the Zoom host. I will now ask Linda Pye to give some reminders about the way we conduct council meetings via Zoom.
Thank you, Leader. Members, standard Zoom reminders are now being shown on screen. In addition to those points, if it becomes necessary for any members to telephone into the meeting, you won't be able to signal to speak. So once everyone who has raised a Zoom hand has spoken, the leader will be asked to invite anyone who has telephoned in to speak in order. Any voting necessary will take place by a physical show of hands. If we need to adjourn the meeting at any point, the leader will adjourn and will advise the executive of the revised time and date of the meeting. If it is a short adjournment, you will be able to rejoin this Zoom meeting. Otherwise, a fresh appointment will be sent out. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed?
Okay, I can't see any hands going up, Linda, so in which case we can move on to item 1 on this evening's agenda, which is apologies. I'm just going to make a note. We've got a special executive in the middle of this meeting, and I'm actually going to take the apologies and declarations for both meetings at this point rather than try to repeat them later. So do we have any apologies for this meeting, for both meetings?
None received.
None received, thank you.
Sorry, Leader, just from Councillor Brooks for lateness.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dillon. Item 2 on our agenda this evening then is the minutes from our previous meeting. Are members willing to accept the previous minutes as an accurate record of this meeting? And do I have a seconder for them?
Leader, I'm happy to second the minutes.
Okay. I'm not seeing anybody with their hand up, and therefore please can I ask executive members to indicate by raising their actual hand if they agree that the minutes can be signed as a true and accurate record of the previous meetings. I can therefore declare that the minutes have been approved, and I will sign those at a later date. So thank you everybody for those. Moving on, we can take item 3 on our agenda this evening, which is our declarations of interest. And as I said, for apologies, we're also going to take the declarations of interest for the special executive meeting at this point. So does anybody have any declarations of interest? I don't see any hands being raised, so I'll take that as no declarations of interest. Thank you. Moving forward, we move on to item 4 on our agenda this evening, which is public questions. First of all, I'd like to thank all the members of the public that have submitted questions for this evening's executive meeting, and welcome those of you able to be in attendance to hear the answers to your questions and to ask a supplementary question if you have one. For those public questioners unable to join this meeting, I can confirm that you will receive written responses to your questions and these will be published on the Council's website within 5 clear working days of the meeting. Please note that in accordance with the new processes, you will not need to say, I asked the question standing in my name, because as you can see, your question will appear on the screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. You will then be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question, but please remember that this must be to clarify the response provided and not to introduce any new business. In accordance with paragraph 5.12.9 of the Constitution, where questioners have more than one question, only their first question will be answered. If after all other questions have been asked and answered, and there is sufficient time, we will answer subsequent questions. Please note that the time limit for public questions is restricted to 30 minutes. And if your questions have not been answered in that time, you will receive a written response within 5 clear working days of the meeting. The responses given either verbally at the meeting or in writing will be published on the Council's website. Now, I understand that Mrs. Miriam Lee is not able to join the meeting and therefore she will receive a written response to her question A on the agenda. And therefore we can move forward and invite Councillor Ross McKinnon to answer Mr. John Goatley's question B on the agenda this evening. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Leader. And Mr. Goatley, I hope you're well and you can hear me. Thanks for your question. So the pollutants to which you refer here, so copper, zinc, cadmium and polycyclic hydrocarbon aromatics, I've been practicing that one, they come from the internal combustion engine. They come from cars and vehicles and lorries on roads. They end up getting washed into water courses. And there's obviously a knock-on effect on biodiversity and health from those. So really what the council are doing to do that, now of course it's a national issue, it's not just a West Berkshire issue, but it's about encouraging the use of alternative transport and trying to nudge people into using polluting vehicles that bit less. So I guess a key aim of our environment strategy and our ultra low emission vehicle strategy is to have as many ultra low emission and sustainable vehicles in our fleet as possible. And I'm pleased to say that the council has almost 30% of its vehicle fleet being fully electric, and there are plans to increase that over the coming years, as well as we are in the process of producing a new local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, and we're investing significantly in active travel as well. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Goatley?
Phil, could you confirm Mr. Goatley is in the room?
Here we go. Yep. Yes. Is there any monitoring of the level of these pollutants in the specifically the Northcroft stream, since most of it seems to have died in wildlife?
I'm not aware whether there is or is not monitoring of that stream in particular, Mr. Goatley. I would point out that the water that goes into that stream does not just come from the A339. There's about 70 hectares worth of Newbury Town Centre is the catchment for that stream. That's about 100 football pitches. So I know you refer in the question to A339, but in terms of specific pollutant monitoring, I can't answer that at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Can we move on then to question E on our agendas this evening, which is Mr. Paul Morgan. And it's a question to Councillor Ross McKinnon.
Thanks, Mr. Morgan. I hope you're well. That breakdown of cost, it's not breakdown of cost at all. I wasn't expecting that question to be up there for question E. Can we just clarify that that is question E?
That's not actually question E on our agendas. The question E on our agendas is regarding the overview and scrutiny management.
That's it. So I think, Linda, if you just scroll back down, you've got it as D on that file. That one there.
That's question E on everybody's agenda.
So I'll answer this one for you now, Mr. Morgan, and the others we'll get to in due course. So yeah, that breakdown of 946,000, that is already in the public domain. That is split between legal fees, consultancy fees, and reimbursements to the developer. So that is already in the public domain, and it was spent between 2011 and 2019. Do you have a supplementary?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you, Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that 946, I can't see the breakdown. And if you look at the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee, it doesn't break down 946K.
It may not be in that particular report, Mr. Morgan. I'm assured that the information has been released.
Well, that's what I'm asking for, Councillor McKinnon.
Well, I can tell you that 555,000 was on legal fees, 160,000 was on property consultancy fees, 175,000 a reimbursement to the developer for cost aids already incurred before the contract was set aside by the court, and 53,000 to a Big Four accountancy firm for advice on property valuations.
That's different from the figures in the OSMC. So could you provide me those details, Councillor McKinnon, please?
Well, I think I did just answer your supplementary.
Well, in writing, I haven't. If you can,
Mr. Morgan, all of the responses will come out in writing on the website. Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you.
We can therefore move on to item G, or question G on our agendas, which is from Mr. Jack Harkness, and that's to Councillor Ross McKinnon. Oh, you've gone past it, Linda.
That's it, Linda. No, H. You've got it as H on your file now. So the question,
right? The
letters are just a wee bit out on this document. So
no,
that's not H, is it?
No.
There we are. It's I. That's the one, is it?
Apologies, everybody. This is item G on the public pack that has been published. So it's from Jack Harkness, and I will read it out for you. It's, can the council explain how they can re-provision the football ground without purchasing land, as the requirement for the re-provision of sports grounds are that there must be a net reduction in overall sporting facilities. Councillor McKinnon, are you able to answer that, please?
I am able to answer that, Lisa. Thanks for doing that.
Could we could we stop moving the questions? I think if we can't find them, I think we'll just stop moving them.
That's it. Yeah, I can. So Mr. Harkness, I hope you can hear me. I hope you're well. Securing replacement facilities does not have to be by acquisition of freehold land. Now, I know you asked a question very similar to this at the public Zoom meeting. And we did say that the negotiations that we're having with the various parties at the moment, they're still sensitive. So I can't go into too much detail right now. And we're hopeful of being able to announce further details very, very soon. But just as a hypothetical, it's perfectly possible for the council to re-provision land that it currently owns as a replacement football pitch. So that would require the outlay of lots of money on freehold land, or indeed leasing land that is owned by somebody else. It wouldn't be acquiring a freehold. So all of those are options, and I hope that answers your question. But do you have a supplementary?
Well, I did have a supplementary, but I think you covered in my supplementary.
All right, thanks, Mr. Hunt.
The supplementary is basically what happens if the current plan falls through. But I think you covered that.
We do. We do have contingency plans. Thanks, Mr. Hunt.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harkness. We can
point of order, leader.
Yes, Councillor Bridgman.
Can I suggest, given that the screen sharing is
not
working, either we stop screen sharing so we're not distracting ourselves with what's on the screen, and you simply read out the questions.
I think that will be best.
Or I was going to suggest that Linda actually shares the item 4 of the agenda in turn, but I think it's easier if you just read them out, Leader.
I'm quite happy to do that. So next we're going to item J on your agendas, which is a question from Mr. Graham Story to Councillor Hilary Cole. And the question reads, will the council commit to building at least 1,000 homes for social rent to help the 2,300 households identified in the draft housing strategy as in need of social housing? So Councillor Cole, are you able to answer that for us, please?
Thank you, Leader. And thank you for your question, Mr. Story. Firstly, West Berkshire Council is not a general needs housing stockholder, as this stock was transferred to Sovereign Housing Association in 1989. The council therefore works in partnership with Sovereign and the other 18 housing associations who operate within the district to deliver and manage affordable social housing. Secondly, the figure of 2,300 you quote, is the number of households on the Common Housing Register. Of that number, 861 people currently qualify for social housing. In 2015, the Conservative manifesto targeted the building of 1,000 affordable homes in the period 2015 to 2020. To date, permissions for 1,273 affordable homes have been granted across the district. The council is rightly proud of its affordable homes policy, which we rigorously apply and defend. It requires developers to deliver 40% affordable housing on greenfield sites and 30% on brownfield sites. On development sites of less than 15 dwellings, a sliding scale approach is used to calculate affordable housing provision. And we are one of the very few local authorities in the country which seeks affordable housing contributions for developments between 5 and 9 dwellings. And we're exceedingly successful in achieving these. This underpins the council's strategy of a housing mix with something for everyone, as well as the requirement to deliver 10,500 homes during the 20-year period of the local plan, which will include social housing. And the emerging housing strategy sets out the plans that will achieve this. Do you have a supplementary? Mr. Story.
I can't actually see Mr. Story over with the panelists, Phil. Is Mr. Story here?
He was, leader.
Well, I'm just promoting him now. There we go. He's in the room now.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Story, do you have a supplementary question?
Hello, Councillor Cole, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so are you saying that effectively, because you outsource the provision of much social housing to independent providers, West Berkshire Council are not taking responsibility for meeting the needs of poorer families through homes for social rent?
Well, I thought I'd explained, Mr. Story, that our general housing stock, which is homes for social rent, were passed over to sovereign housing in 1989. We are not the general stockholder. However, I also explained that we have a 40 and 30% requirement for affordable housing to be delivered on all new sites, greenfield and brownfield. So yes, we are responsible, and our housing team work with sovereign to ensure that those qualifying households are allocated social housing. And as I mentioned, the qualifying households currently are 861.
Thank you, Mr. Story.
Okay, thank you, councillors.
We can therefore move on to item C on our agenda this evening, which is Mr. Goatley to Councillor Ross McKinnon, and it's I'll read it out. It's taking into account any retro attenuation of the Thames water sewer and the need for SUDS, as mentioned in the Avison Young brief on the LRIE. How many acres does the executive envisage being taken up by SUDS attenuation ponds? Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Leader, and hello again, Mr. Goatley. I tell you what, since taking over this portfolio, I've had a crash course in retro attenuation, SUDS, and polycyclic carbon aromatics. It's been a real journey. However, that crash course notwithstanding, I'm not able to answer your question right now. The extent of the drainage measures that are going to be required on the site will depend very much on the decision the council takes in terms of what gets developed and when. So I'm afraid it's far too early to give you an indication of that right now, but do you have a supplementary regardless?
Yes. So what do you have any idea what plots you would earmark for attenuation ponds? Because obviously they've got to be done at the start of the business.
Yeah, again, Mr. Goatley, it's just too early to say at this stage. Watch this space and we'll get to those decisions in due course.
Okay.
Okay, I've then got There's some, I've then got question F on the agenda, which is Mr. Morgan, but according to my agenda, question F is the overview and scrutiny cost breakdown. So there's something gone wrong with our questioning this evening, and I can only apologise to our public for that. So I'm going to go back to Mr. John Goatley and make sure I cover everybody's questions. But I've got question D next on my briefing notes, which is, have we done question D from Mr. John Goatley to Councillor Ross McKinnon? And this is, how will the space being taken up by SUDS, attenuation ponds on the LRIE, impact on the viability of the project?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. And Mr. Goatley, you probably won't be surprised to hear what I'm about to tell you, given my answer to your previous question about not being able to tell you how much space will be taken up by SUDS. I'm not able to answer this one either because it's dependent on the previous answer, but I will give you the opportunity for a supplementary nonetheless.
Okay.
Thank you. We're now moving to question. Oh, sorry.
If you want to have one.
So in that case, if you can't answer these things there, was it right to instruct Avison Young to do a viability brief before did an environmental impact study, which would have told you whether you could do these things or not?
Well, thank you for asking a question that I can answer, Mr. Goatley. I'm very appreciative of it. Yes, it was right to do so. I think we've covered this in previous consultations, but we'll do it again for the public. The Avison Young assignment to produce the development brief was really the overall high-level viability. It was to answer the question as to whether or not a regeneration project remained viable. The cost and the time taken and the level of detail that would be required to answer the very relevant questions, but the very technical and detailed questions that you're asking have to come later than that. So, you know, we've got a paper coming up later, which talks about the next steps following the publication of the development brief. And those questions will now begin to be answered. But it would, I think, be not a great use of council taxpayers' money to have spent all of that cash and time getting answers to those questions where the development wasn't viable in the first place. So hopefully that's answered your question, Mr. Goatley, and thanks again for asking.
Okay, we then move on to item H on our agenda, which is Mr. Morgan. Mr. Morgan, I hope that this is the right question for you this time. Please do, I've got two more coming from you, but if you feel I need another one, please let me know at the end of this. So question H, as you can see there is it the council's policy and intention to sell the freehold of the Faraday Road football ground to a property developer? And that's to Councillor McKinnon.
Yep, thanks, Leader, and thanks, Mr. Morgan. At this stage, it's kind of a similar theme, Mr. Morgan, to the answers I've given to Mr. Goatley. At the stage of the project we are now, it's too early to say what's going to happen to the project. It's great that you and Mr. Goatley and others are so interested in it, and that's magic. But at this stage, it is not our intention or policy to sell the freehold to a property developer. Decisions along those lines have yet to be made. Do you have a supplementary?
Mr. Morgan, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. I was just waiting to become unmuted there. In answer to your first point, Councillor Doherty, I have got another question regarding the spend on the industrial estate, but maybe we'll come back to that.
Okay.
In answer to the question regarding, a subsequent question, if you have no idea whether you're going to sell the ground or not, Councillor McKinnon, how come the Avison Young report confirms that it's commercially viable without knowing that information?
Well, I think the two things can be true at once here, Mr. Morgan. Selling it to a property developer, let's say we don't do that, that doesn't mean that it won't be developed. That doesn't mean that it's not going to be built out. We don't have to sell the freehold of that ground in order to do that. So I think the two options you've suggested are not actually mutually exclusive. I think that was your supplementary, wasn't it? Leader, if I can help at all, Mr. Morgan is referring to question F.
Can I just hold you there one moment, Councillor Sumner? Councillor Sumner has had his hand up for some time, and I just wonder if he wanted to come in on these particular questions or if it was something completely different. So can I just pause there 1 second? Councillor Sumner.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. No, it was to point out exactly what Councillor McKinnon was about to point out, which is that it's question F, which we've moved over. which is worded very similarly to the previous question, but there is a slight change at the end of it, and that's why it looks like you've had the same one twice, Leader.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Shall we stick with? They're all yours, Mr. Morgan. So shall we go for I next, which is the one we can see in front of us before we go back to F. So you can see I written in front of you just now. So do you want to take that, Councillor McKinnon?
Yes, thanks, Leader. Okay, so I've answered the question to say that it's not our intention to do that, certainly at this stage. Even if it were, I don't think I'd be able to give you an answer to that question. You know, what price do we anticipate receiving from the sale? That would not be looking after council taxpayers' money very well at all. I think the analogy I would draw is that if you wanted to sell your house and you expected to get 250,000 for it, you wouldn't say that to a potential buyer who may be willing to pay 300,000. You know, it just wouldn't be the way you would go about maximising the value. So that's my answer. That's the only answer I can give at this stage, Mr. Morgan. But do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thanks for that explanation. So I'm a bit confused, Councillor McKinnon. So if you don't sell it, what alternative have you got for the football ground? I was a bit confused on that. Maybe you can clarify that for me.
Well, again, the decisions on what exactly goes on Faraday Road, those, I appreciate the keenness, but those decisions just haven't been made at this stage. I guess to answer this question as accurately as possible, it is perfectly feasible that we could build out on Faraday Road, the football ground, without selling the freehold, which is the precise wording of the question. So again, I think we're a little bit at cross purposes, and I guess that's the best answer I can give.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Mr. Morgan, can we go back to question F for you? And I apologise that I understand there's a different line at the end that made me think that was different. So, so we can now see your question F. So that is also to Councillor McKinnon. So Councillor McKinnon, can you answer Councillor F for Mr. Morgan?
Yes, of course, Leader. Right, Mr. Morgan. So the additional spend on top of the 946,000 figure that we've already talked about this evening. The link road, A339 link road into the estate was built. That was part of the original proposal. It remains essential to a future proposal as well, actually. Now, the total cost of that A339 link road was £5.2 million. Now, by no means did that all come from West Berkshire Council. Approximately £2 million came from the LEP. The Department for Transport supplied £1.8 million. £1.1 million was provided by council borrowing, and £0.3 million, 300,000 from Section 106 funding. So that, to be fully complete in my answer, I have to talk about that because it was related to the original London Road project. It's worth pointing out actually that the widening of the 339 has drastically improved the flow of traffic, which is environmental benefits, as well as there being a clear public benefit to the new link road, without which future regeneration and redevelopment of the estate would not be possible. So the real benefit in the meantime, but I guess that's the principal extra cost that you refer to. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Yeah, maybe it's my wording of the question, but what I was trying to ascertain on that question was, for example, the Everson Young report, how much has been spent on that? The SSL consultancy, how much on that? How much are you going to spend on the Everson Young Mark II report? How much are you going to spend on the brief? That's what my question was about, Councillor McKinnon. So you've answered a question that I didn't really ask, but maybe I take responsibility. Maybe that wasn't clear. So that's the information I'm after, really.
Okay, no, that's fair, Mr. Morgan.
And I'll tell you why I'm after that question. Sorry, just to interrupt you. And I guess you haven't got that information at hand now, have you?
Well, the redevelopment, the money that we're going to spend to the public open space, the conversion of the Faraday Road plot in the meantime, before it's built out, that's just over 200,000. So I can answer that one.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah, no decisions have been made on what happens next. So again, we're anticipating jumping the gun a wee bit on what happens in the future. The original Everson Young report.
Okay.
I don't want to say things that are untrue off the top of my head. There's a figure of 80,000 that I think is round about there. But I mean, the 5.2 million in the link road view, that is by far the biggest chunk of that. So I think we got close to the ballpark in the end. No,
I understand that. But what I'm trying to get to, let me cut to the chase there. What I'm trying to get to, so we've already spent 946k on the estate already. Leaving on one side the road for 1 minute, yeah? They've already spent nearly £1 million. I'm estimating that you've probably got at least another £1.5 million to go on some of the stuff we've talked about. But my supplementary question is this, though.
I believe I've answered it already, Mr. Morgan. Your supplementary question, I'm afraid.
Well, I don't think you have.
I've had a few goes tonight, but I think I've answered.
My question is, of all this spend, is that feeding into the Everson Young report regarding the commercial viability of the estate? That's my question. These figures we talked about.
As I said, Mr. Morgan, I answered your first question here, and I answered a supplementary.
With respect,
in the interest of fairness, nobody else gets 2 supplementaries. So,
Mr. Morgan, I think there's some confusion around how that question's worded. So if you want to resubmit a question, please do so. But I think Councillor McKinnon has answered the question that's been put before him this evening. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for their public questions and for attending this evening's meeting. Our attendees will now, our public attendees will now leave the meeting, and they're very welcome to continue to watch from the live stream. So thank you all for your questions this evening, and please feel free to watch from the live stream the rest of the meeting. So thank you very much. Okay, members, we can move forward with this evening's agenda and we go to item 5, which is petitions. I haven't been informed of any petitions, so unless anybody's going to wave frantically at me, I'm going to move on to item 6 on this evening's agenda. And that is the London Road Industrial Estate Everson Young Development Brief. Councillor McKinnon, I believe you're going to introduce this report.
I am. Thanks very much, Leader. It's a pleasure to bring forward this paper, really, which notes the feedback from the public consultation from the Everson Young Development Brief. And what we're asking tonight is that the Executive approves the publication of the final development brief post-consultation. I'm very happy to be doing this. I'm very excited. It represents the next step, really, on the journey towards the regeneration of this site. And what that's going to do, let's restate it again, it's going to revamp and transform the eastern approach to Newbury Town Centre, and it's going to attract business, enterprise and residents to what is going to be a high quality and first class residential office and business development. So things are progressing nicely. Here today, we note the comments from the consultation. That consultation ran to the 5th of November. And some of those comments have resulted in changes to the development brief, which are specified in the paper before us tonight. A couple of examples, to clarify, the brief's been changed to clarify, for instance, that certain compulsory purchase orders won't be pursued. We can put people's minds at rest on that score. And also there was a lot of clarification involved. For example, in the status of the document, this document is not a planning document. It was never intended to be. It's proper that it isn't, because we've got that potential conflict of interest to deal with as landowner and planning authority. So all of those comments are detailed in the paper. We had lots of other comments as well from the public, a lot of them around the football ground, a lot of them around flood mitigation, which won't be a surprise to members who've been around the block with this in the past. Yes, they've been dealt with extensively in public before this consultation exercise, but nonetheless, the brief has been updated where appropriate to clarify further our position on these areas. The consultation with stakeholders included leaseholders in the estate and occupational tenants being contacted directly by Everson Young, both by email and letter, and they were given the opportunity to take part in consultation sessions directly with Everson Young and West Berkshire Council officers. I think many people here would have also attended one of the 2 public Zoom sessions which were conducted. The first was where AY Everson Young presented their development brief in full to the public. And the second was fairly recently, just a couple of weeks ago, where I, along with officers, took public questions for over an hour. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope people found it useful. So overall, I think the consultation process hasn't thrown up matters that should alter the council's decision to regenerate the London Road Industrial Estate. So we are planning and we're happy to move forward with the next steps, which is very exciting. The next steps involve, from this point, bringing a proposal to the next executive meeting in December, which will detail the council's decisions on how to proceed from here. So we will, colleagues and opposition members, be here again in a month listening to me talk about the London Road Industrial Estate again, and I'm sure that's going to provide some Christmas cheer to everyone at that point. So I'm happy to put this paper forward. Leader, that's all from me for now. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Members of the Executive, does this paper find a seconder?
Leader, I'd like to second and reserve my rights.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Members of the Executive, do you have any particular questions for Councillor McKinnon with regards to item 6 on your agenda this evening? No. In which case, members of the opposition, do you have any questions for Councillor McKinnon with regards to item 6 on the agenda this evening? Councillor Vickers, I can see your hand shot up.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I will be concluding what I have to say with a question, but I hope you will let me just say a little bit about this document, which I did find exciting. We on the opposition side are very excited at the prospect of this very important site being redeveloped. We just wish we hadn't lost 10 years so far and £1 million in doing so. But we are the council and not just any old landowner. And our approach to this site would have been different because, you know, we tell others to foster economic growth and support local communities. And we believe that as the leadership of this whole West Berkshire district community, we've got to set an example here. And we've got to set our ambition higher than just being, securing commercial returns in the short term from perhaps capital receipts and from an income stream. So we look at the master plan and we ask ourselves, is this going to produce economic growth and best value for the whole community? Or is it just going to deliver commercial returns to the council and only, and I quote, reasonably aligned to planning policies, unquote? We can't blame Avison Young for fulfilling the terms of reference that they were given by yourselves, which says, and if I may, I quote from the terms of reference, previous development proposals centred on purely commercial returns to the council where regeneration was not required to deliver public benefits, etc., etc. And then he goes on to say, again, meaning now with this contract, the requirement is for development proposals to centre on commercial returns and where commercially driven proposals must reasonably align with both current local planning policies and national planning guidance. I find that quite shocking. As I say, we are not just a landowner. We are the local authority and we can't escape it. We are the local planning authority. So we don't have to just conform with planning policy. We should exceed it. The portfolio holder for planning knows that we 10 years ago wanted to go further than the government would allow us, for example, in Briam. But we were told that was not allowed. Well, unfortunate, and we can't do anything about it with other landowners. But when it's our own land, we should be aiming to produce an exemplar development, something that follows the example set by Vodafone many years ago when it built a highly sustainable office for itself. Now, we believe we need to keep control of this site. We need to set a highly ambitious master plan, which may require very high density development, certainly will require housing, but will be going beyond what we have to do and not be looking for short-term commercial returns. I have to say we're very pleased with a lot of the changes that have been made, particularly, and again, I'd like to quote if I can, it's a bit difficult on screen to quote from things, but there is one new clause, if I can draw members' attention to see it. I think it's on page 36 of the Avison Young report and 72 of our papers. I can just find that. Bear with me, Leader. It's so difficult when you can't just flip over a few sheets of paper. Yeah, it's basically acknowledging what has been the subject to a lot of the public questions just now, which is just, if I paraphrase it rather than waste time skimming through pages.
Please do, Councillor Vickers.
Oh, yes, here we are. That we will have to provide a replacement football facility before any development passed, and not just any old replacement facility, one that is deemed to be adequate in terms of wider policy, planning policy and Sport England policy. And that wasn't in the previous version, and clearly there has been a response to the consultation in inserting that. I would say that we're also pleased that you've accepted what we said in our response to the consultation, that we should be looking at a local development order as the means of building this out in the way that Greenham Trust have with their ownership up at New Greenham Park. It allows the necessary flexibility within an overarching planning policy to build this out, you know, to move fast without having to wait for constant planning applications to go through the system. So I'm not ashamed that I'm sort of speaking rather as more of a planner than a businessman, but I'm speaking, I hope, as somebody who believes strongly that we, the council, which is also the local planning authority, should be setting an example and going beyond what is required through policy, going beyond what is required on one particular part of our budget, which yes, in overall terms, in the long term, we have to show a profit to taxpayers. But it's not just the council taxpayers we're responsible for, it's to citizens as a whole and to business. And we believe that a more ambitious master plan here, but committing to comply with and perhaps exceed planning policy, would in the long run provide better value for this district and its communities. And
thank you.
I would just, my question is,
well, there's a question.
I did say there was a question to follow, but my question to Councillor McKinnon is, wouldn't he agree that the long-term view and really being proud of the high-tech and green credentials that this council has been striving towards, that as the landowner here, we should be looking beyond just commercial returns?
Okay, thank you for all your thoughts, Councillor Vickers. I'm sure Councillor McKinnon would like the opportunity to respond to them.
Thanks, Leader, and thank you very much, Councillor Vickers. I must admit, I'd forgotten that you'd promised to ask a question. I was happy to respond to your comments anyway, so that's absolutely fine. A few things to unpick there from that response. You know, I can tell that you're very knowledgeable about planning matters. I would point out, though, and not for the first time, that this document was never and could never have been a planning document. The planning detail that you refer to, had that been in here, then we would have been leaving ourselves open to allegations of conflicts of interest and all sorts of problems. So, you know, your question said, do I agree with much of what you said? I don't disagree with much of what you said. And you've clearly got a lot of good things to say there, and there's nothing wrong with much of that. Can I pick up on one thing? You mentioned that you were disappointed that, you know, we'd decided to maximise financial returns at the expense of some other community good, be it economic or social or environmental. I would point out that that's not the case necessarily, Councillor Vickers. That decision on what the real objective of the development is going to be, or the overarching objective, that's not been made yet. You've mentioned the point in the Avison Young brief, which said that they have to look at commercial returns, and of course they do. Right? There has to be an element of financial viability here for this to be a goer. And yet you're right, us as the administration, us as a council, really, we have to, yes, on one hand here, we've got the council taxpayers, you know, financial considerations are not irrelevant, but on the other hand, community good, public realm elements, there's a great opportunity to do good things in this estate along those lines. So I'm not disagreeing with you there. I'm saying that we've jumped the gun a wee bit on that one. That may well come, and in fact, from December onwards, we're going to be addressing those points. I think if I was being slightly unfair to you, and I don't want to be, is that your comments basically could be summarised along the lines of, you know, your public response to the consultation hasn't, you know, we've not amended the thing in full to align with that, and in a way, it's not particularly surprising. But I did just want to take a moment to talk about that response to the consultation in the first place. You know, the Liberal Democrats as a party made a response to the project team in October, and it was subsequently posted as a public statement on your website on the 10th of November. Now, I'm not clear whether that public statement that was posted was a response of the Liberal Democrat group in this council, or the local party, or a bit of both. But to say I was disappointed with it would be the understatement of the decade. And I want to explain why. Now, the statement that you put out on the Lib Dems website, the West Berks Lib Dems website, it was highly critical, as usual, I would say, about the historic management of LRIE. But crucially, it criticised the current management of the project. And it made no mention, and you've made no mention tonight here either, that the Liberal Democrats have a seat on the project board and have had that seat for some time. Now, to my mind, there's no obvious reason why the regeneration of this industrial estate in the middle of Newbury should be party political. And I think it remains a really perfect opportunity for cross-party collaboration. And I think we can achieve together, the Lib Dems and the Conservatives can achieve real tangible benefits to the residents of West Berkshire. Councillor Dillon, Councillor Brooks, yourself, Councillor Vickers, whichever one of you attends that project board, I'm sure you've got a lot to offer there. But what is absolutely untenable is for a Liberal Democrat to be on the project board, be taken into our confidence, have their views listened to in the project board, sometimes have those views implemented, sometimes not. That's the same as me. I'm in that position as well. And then without warning, issue critical public statements, critical of your colleagues on that board, critical of the board in itself. No way, right? That's unacceptable. The Liberal Democrats here have to choose. You can be pure opposition, if that's what you want, and you can criticise and complain to your heart's content. And do you know what? That's fine. The job of an opposition is to do that. I'll still work for a beer afterwards with you. That's not a problem. But if you want to be involved, if you want cross-party working, and you want to take part in the management of the project, you are more than welcome. I want you on board, but you do not throw your colleagues under the bus the way you have there. That is not acceptable behaviour. It ends here and it ends now. Thanks, Leader.
Thanks, Councillor McKinnon. Councillor Masters, you've had your hand up.
Thank you, Leader. Can I congratulate my colleagues, Councillor Vickers and Councillor McKinnon, on their brevity this evening. It's been quite refreshing. Hopefully I won't ramble on for quite so long. Given how passionate many members of our...
Masters, can we just be respectful of the debate? I've let the debate flow, so let's...
Given how passionate many members of our community are about the football ground and the fact that the football ground issue remains largely unresolved, would it now be a great time, with the plans moving forward and the task force that has been spoken about just now, and in a non-partisan manner, would it not be prudent for the council to try and bring the community back on board by apologising for the premature closure of the football ground that is clear to everybody? It's been empty for 2 years. There's no immediate plan to get a new ground across the Newbury area. So it was clearly closed prematurely. Would it not be good public relations and foster more trust in the council if the council could be magnanimous and apologise to the community for a loss of a great asset? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Masters. Councillor McKinnon, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I would say that we do have an imminent plan to replace the football ground, and as I said before, we're hopeful of announcing that in the very near future. I tend to go along, Councillor Masters, with the finding of the independent task group that found that the council acted in accordance with its legal advice and made no improper decisions during that time period to which you refer. I look forward to announcing what's happening with football. I'm very excited about that as well, and I hope that you'll enjoy that announcement when it comes.
Thank you. Councillor Councillor Brooks has been waving frantically at me. He seems to have lost his blue hand entirely. So I'm going to go to Councillor Brooks next. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I lost my blue hand. I couldn't find the yellow hand. I'm all at sea. I will let my leader respond to the political points that have been made regarding the opposition. But I do think that there is a sense of proportionality to reflect the makeup of the council. As I say, I'll let Councillor Dillon come back on that. But here's my question. No big talks or speeches. Can I get some clarity, and it may be in the document, but I didn't see it, some clarity on whether the council will look to retain ownership? It has a large amount of ownership on this area. And in retaining it, we therefore grow revenue streams for decades to come. Simply selling it as a capital receipt is very much a one-off. That money is still useful, I know, but we could look at flexible ways of retaining ownership and retaining, therefore, income streams for the benefit of taxpayers for decades to come. Where are we on that consideration, please?
Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Brooks. Where are we on that? That remains an option. Absolutely right. I can tell you right now that I have not decided, and the executive have not decided, the project board have not decided that what we want out of this is maximum capital receipts, full stop. I can absolutely assure you of that. So the way that the financial benefit finally accrues to the council, whether that is, if we get an offer we can't refuse, whether that is a capital receipt, who knows? If it's a case of long-term rental income and long-term steady income towards the revenue budget, of course, that's a feasibility and a possibility.
We'll be watching. Thank you.
Thank you both. Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. A comment on the development brief, if I may. I think our preference is for long-term revenue streams, but also having the freehold allows for it to be regenerated again in another 100 years. And the town will keep developing over time, and actually when you hold the freehold, it gives you more say over how to shape that future. So I think it's right that we keep as much of that into local residents and taxpayers' hands as possible. In Councillor McKinnon's introduction to the item, he spoke about a business and commercial and a residential development, and I think for us as well, it's what role can leisure play there, and in particular, what role could a football club play within the whole envelope of that site. And so I think there's a clear difference for us there in terms of looking to explore areas. And of course, we did have concerns that I think some of the public questions were trying to get to the nub of this, around the viability of the site with the football club site not included in some of those costings. The second point around it is making sure that it matches with the upcoming Newbury master plan. And we very much see those two sites complementing each other, the town centre and linking that through to London Road, and we'd like to see that worked through. Just to finish off, Leader, obviously I do need to respond to Councillor McKinnon's comments there about our response. I think the first thing probably to note is that the Conservatives didn't win a majority of the votes at the last election, that there are 16 Liberal Democrats and we have Green colleagues on the council as well. So West Berkshire residents wanted a strong opposition that they've now got. But of course, they do want us to work together as well. But no one should expect that if someone is critical of a process or a way forward, that they are not able to let that be heard. And we were invited by the administration, by the executive, to respond to a consultation. And that is what we did. And what we wanted to do was to be able to, rather than keep it a debate within the chamber, was actually let the people of Newbury know that under a Liberal Democrat administration in 2023, this is how we would see the rest of London Road being developed out. But also call into account the previous mismanagement, which has now been independently agreed via OSMC. They said the project management was poor. That now is a fact that your executive has accepted by adopting the report as well. So I think, Ross, let's not fake criticism here, but I would expect you to be able to handle a little bit of criticism about engagement, and to take it really as a challenge, as a mantle, to come back and do it even better, so that we can't criticise it for you next time. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Councillor McKinnon, would you like to respond to that?
Yep, thanks, Leader, and thanks, Councillor Dillon. A statement of two parts from me there. Let's deal with the first part first, at which point I think we're going to break out in violent agreement. Holding the freehold remains an option. What you said is eminently sensible. Let's keep that on board. Linking into the second half of what you said, those are points that I want to hear from you in the project board, or if it's not you who attends, somebody else, then that's where we want to hear those points. We don't want to hear them for the first time in a public response to a consultation document. The master plan point you mentioned, absolutely correct. Yeah, these two areas of work are going to be side by side, so 100% agree with you on that one. your question about the viability of the site without the football ground, the viability isn't there without the football ground being available for building out on. I'm happy to make that clear again. I don't want this to, I think this has been quite for most members tonight, it's been a good natured and constructive discussion. So I want to keep that going. What I would say is that I don't want you not to be critical, but if you're on the project board, that is the venue. And that's where you make your views heard. What I just find completely outrage. I know that sometimes politicians like to play it up for the cameras. I promise you, I was not playing it up when I said I was gutted. I thought I was appalled when that happened.
Okay, can I suggest,
Leader, I'm going to bring it to a close now.
We focus on the actual topic Absolutely on our agenda. I think you've both had the opportunity to have your say. I'm not looking at having any more political conversation on this evening. I'm only taking questions purely on item 6, which is around the Everson Young report now. So, Councillor Dinner, I take it you've had your questions, and actually what I'm hearing all around is there's actually agreement here. So let's not forget and undermine that. So Councillor Abbs, I hope this is a question relating or a discussion relating to the actual brief itself.
Yeah, I hope so too, Councillor Leader. With this word viability, I would be interested in Councillor McKinnon's response on it, because viability comes with your terms of reference. And if your terms of reference are purely commercial, of course, you're going to design everything and think only on commercial terms. To say that something isn't viable just because it doesn't deliver an absolute commercial return is based on commercial being your only interest. If community is your major interest, actually, the return can be just as viable based on community return. So I'm really looking for Councillor McKinnon to assure me, and I guess some of my colleagues as well, that this viability piece is not just driven by the commercial side. Everson Young may well have said, yes, we can make a load of money on it. Great. I think I'm hearing, and I'm hoping you're going to agree with me, Councillor McKinnon, that that isn't going to be our only priority, and that we really are going to focus on the community. And I won't go bore you with the details of why the community, because they've said it so well in the past. But thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Abbs. Councillor McKinnon, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, sir, Leader, and yes, I think we are able to give that assurance to Councillor Abbs. I wouldn't say it's one or the other. You know, I've got two things I need to balance here. I've got the finances of West Berkshire, which is not insignificant, and I've got the needs of the community, which in part are served by the financial returns that the council gets from the district. Let's not forget about that. But also on social, environmental, and other goods that could come out of this site. We haven't seen yet what the decisions of the council are going to be for the next steps. So I don't want to anticipate what comes before this executive in December, but I think I'd be pleasantly optimistic if I was him that his assurance is going to be able to be given.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I think everybody feels quite passionately about this. I'm just going to come back to Councillor Wollaston for the final word because he didn't have the opportunity to speak, and then we'll be moving on with this agenda item. So, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Leader. It seems to me that this is an opportunity for the council as a whole to have a major vision for this part of Newbury. If you drive up the A339 and look on the left-hand side, it frankly looks a mess. It's an embarrassment to the town, in my view. We as a council have signed up to climate emergency, so it's inconceivable that we won't be following the best possible exemplar, I think someone described it as, for the development of the scheme. It also will generate economic growth for West Berkshire. So I wholly commend this report and look forward to the next stage.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Members of the executive, you've heard the discussion this evening. We have a recommendation in front of us. That recommendation is that the executive approves publication of the London Road Industrial Estate Development Brief in its final form post public consultation. Please can executive members vote by raising their actual hand in favour of the proposal to approve the recommendation.
Thank you, Leader. I can confirm that the recommendation has been approved.
Thank you, everybody. We now move to a slightly different normal meeting in the fact that we're going to adjourn this executive meeting to go into a special executive meeting so that we can have the opportunity to publicly discuss the Walnut Close care home report. Unfortunately, this first part one piece of this paper was missed off the original pack that was circulated and sent out. So in order to deal with this, we actually have to adjourn the meeting that we were in we'll come back to this meeting once we've had the special executive meeting. So you don't actually have to go anywhere. I'm just officially adjourning the normal meeting and moving into our special executive meeting. I'm looking at Shiraz to tell me I've done that correctly and that I am now in the special executive meeting. We've already taken apologies and declarations, so we can move straight to item 3, which I'm very happy to hand over to Councillor Bridgman to introduce the report and say a little bit more about this.
Leader, thank you. Let me start this part of the special meeting by saying thank you to the service manager and author of this report, Sarah Ross, who has joined the meeting. And that's for the amount of work, care, and in particular, and I'll come to this, engagement that has gone into this.
Point of order, but it's showing on top of my screen, recording live on custom live streaming service. I just want to double check that we are actually...
We're in part one, so that's perfectly
one.
acceptable, Councillor Wilston.
We
will move to part 2 later.
Okay.
Don't worry, part 2's coming. So yes, and Sarah has done an awful amount of work in order to get to the point, because as everyone will appreciate, proposing the closure of a care home is not something that we do lightly, and huge amount has gone in to ensure that all the things that should be considered have been considered, and not least the welfare of the residents at Walnut Close. The report, in my view, and I'm happy to take questions, but the report very much explains itself. In essence, we have sufficient spaces of the right kind in our Birchwood care home to accommodate all of the residents from our Walnut Close care home in a much more modern setting with enhanced facilities such as ensuite bathrooms, and Birchwood is under 2 miles from Walnut, so there shouldn't be any issues for families in visiting. Obviously, that's subject to the restrictions we have currently on visiting, although we had a release today where we are looking forward to the results of the various tests that are going on in order to expand that. So let me, for members, pick out some of the key issues. First, and I very much hope this goes without saying, Sarah and the staff at Walnut know all of the Walnut residents and their families very well. So they already have a good idea as to what particular part of Birchwood will be best suited for a particular resident. Without going into individual detail, at Walnut we have some dementia residents with a deprivation of liberty safeguards assessment. We have some dementia residents without a DOLS assessment. We have residents who require nursing care, and we have residents who don't. And each will be allocated the right kind of room in the right area of Birchwood to suit their needs. In formal terms, and to ensure that everything is taken into account that should be, each resident will have their care plan reviewed, and that review may involve, as appropriate, the resident's family as well as relevant professionals, both internal and external. Now, so far as staff are concerned, all of the Walnut Care staff, with 3 exceptions, are being offered like roles at Birchwood. And the current indication is that they will all take up those offers, so that there is going to be a continuity of friendly faces when residents arrive in their new surroundings. The 3 exceptions are earmarked for like posts in other parts of adult social care, and therefore we don't anticipate any redundancies, although I will cover the specifics of that in the part 2 meeting. Very importantly, and I really want to emphasize this, the move is not going to be rushed. Nothing is going to be done this side of Christmas. The intention is that in the new year, once everything's in place, each resident will be moved along with his or her personal furniture and possessions, probably with 2 or 3 being moved on the same day so that they have familiar faces around them when they arrive. And this is going to, and I really want to emphasize this, this is going to take as long as it needs to. But the expectation currently is that everyone will be settled in by the end of February. You'll also note in the report that is intended that up to 10 of the Walnut residents will be accommodated in the currently empty ground floor at Birchwood, which is currently called Silver Birch, but is going to be renamed Walnut. And that will be staffed by some of those who've moved across, so there will be familiarity in that part of Birchwood. All of the Birchwood accommodation earmarked for Walnut residents is being redecorated, so everything should be nice and fresh when they arrive. Now, if we look at the responses to the consultation that are in the report, I want to say that following the formal responses that are recorded there, Sarah, and I really want to commend her for this, has personally engaged with the majority of residents and their families in particular, and made them aware of what the alternative looks like. And I'm going to directly quote Sarah on this to this extent. All these discussions have been very positive, and the residents spoken to were all very excited and particularly happy that they would be moved to Birchwood, where they will have their own bathrooms. Now, we can never completely remove risk, but Sarah and her team have done everything possible to allay the concerns and emphasize the comprehensive risk assessments that are going to be undertaken. And that should include any concerns about the wider community COVID rates in existence at the time of the move and those in the receiving home or homes. So we are definitely going to be taking account of COVID as and when residents are moved across, and there will be testing as necessary. So, to conclude, I trust that members will accept that all possible steps are being taken to mitigate the risks, and that the aim is to improve the living and working conditions for everyone from Walnut. We can accommodate the current Walnut residents with far greater dignity and in better surroundings, including ensuite bathrooms, in a more modern care home less than 2 miles away. And so I endorse this report and propose the recommendations at 2.1. But I think, Leader, we will actually take that vote in part 2 when we get to it, but correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman, and thank you for taking the time out to take us through that. I appreciate this is a sensitive report, and I appreciate the time that you've taken to explain the measures that have been put in place. And thank you to Sarah for joining us as well, because I think, you know, we can't underestimate how sensitive this issue is for residents. So thank you for that, Councillor Bridgman. Members of the executive, can I ask, does this find a seconder amongst us?
I'm very happy to second this, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Arderwater. As Councillor Bridgman stated, we won't actually be taking the vote for this in part 1 because there is a part 2 discussion. So we'll have the discussion that we can on part 1 at this point, but then the actual recommendations will come before you again in part 2 for us to actually take a vote on this. So members of the executive, any other questions? Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Leader. No questions, but just to say on the live stream and agree with Councillor Bridgman's comments, and to compliment Sarah for the high level of care that's been taken to ensure the smooth transition of these residents from Walnut Close to Birchwood. I know when I was portfolio holder for adult social care, I was concerned about Walnut Close, and that was some years ago. So I'm pleased and delighted that we are having a far better solution for these residents and far superior accommodation than they're currently enjoying. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor Macro, would you like to come in there?
Thank you, Leader. Thank you very much for the report and for those, Graham, for those assurances. I'm a bit worried still about the issue with COVID-19. If you're intending, as I think I heard you say, you wanted to have the move completed by February, I would like to think that this is not going to happen until the pandemic has subsided for obvious reasons. But I'm pleased that you've got to take care to make sure that there's no cases of COVID kind of in the people being moved or the in the care in Berkshire when they've actually moved. Moving is stressful for anybody at any time, but for people in a care home, it's very much more so. So I'm very pleased that you're going to try and keep the residents together in that kind of what you're now going to rename the Walnut area of Birchwood, and because that will enable the residents to maintain the relationships they've built up both between themselves and hopefully between themselves and the staff. So I'm very, very pleased to hear that. The report mentions the fact that, we've got quite a lot of empty beds, shall I say, throughout the care home estate. But it doesn't mention dementia beds. So that means that there's 11 beds in Walnut Close which are used for dementia patients. I'd like an assurance, please, that there will still be sufficient capacity for dementia residents when this move is completed and the home is closed, bearing in mind that finding the dementia beds in the private sector are so very expensive and beyond the means of very many people of kind of modest means, shall we say. The final one is really part of the rationale for closing Walnut Close is the fact that the building is deteriorated and needs a significant sum of money spent on it. I just wondered why that's been allowed to happen. When we're talking about rooms being unusable because of the state of the floor or the state of the roof, and if we continue using the home, then that might affect, these problems might affect more rooms. It's very worrying, and I wonder why that's been allowed to happen.
Councillor Bridgman, would you like to respond to Councillor Macro?
Yeah, I'll take the dementia beds first. I'm assured that we will have sufficient dementia beds going forward, and indeed each of the residents of Walnut, where they will be going if we approve this paper in Birchwood, has been identified, and in anticipation of those care assessments, and of course I'm not going to be absolutely specific. Firstly, I don't want to identify anyone, and secondly, the care assessments need to take place as part of that process. But Sarah does know where she thinks each of the individuals will end up in Birchwood, and their needs will be taken care of, and we will have, and we will still have beds available in Birchwood after this on the current numbering. So far as the second point you make, I mean, this is basically, you're just repeating what you asked me, although we didn't get time to answer it verbally at last meeting, and my answer to your question has been published. So let me just repeat the answer I gave you in writing, which is that it is not that we have somehow permitted this care home to deteriorate. What has happened is that there was a plan for refurbishment prior to COVID. The money was put aside for that plan to be carried out, and then COVID got in the way. At the time COVID landed, one single room at Walnut was out of action, and the reason it was out of action was because it had been damaged by some people moving, some external people moving furniture about. The damage you refer to in terms of flooding and the floor happened from memory in July, midst COVID. And of course, we weren't going to have workmen coming in and doing work in Walnut in the middle of the pandemic, particularly given that we didn't require the rooms for residents. Not only were those rooms not required, we had other rooms in Walnut that were not required. So we actually had perfectly proper rooms available for use. So it is wholly incorrect to suggest that we have somehow allowed this to happen. We are simply taking account of a situation which we find ourselves in. We have enough rooms in Birchwood to move the residents from Walnut into better surroundings, and that's why we're doing it.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I wanted to just reflect on the care side of it, and the work that's been done by the officers. I had a briefing on it myself. It's in my ward, and just wanted to add to Councillor Cole the congratulations on how the decant has been thought about and managed. I've been involved in decanting myself into big schemes, and it's a challenge, and I think the officers have given consideration, and the fact that we're keeping that community together as much as they want to, you know, by going to Birchwood is absolutely imperative, I think, to their longer term care and the success of that decant project. So I think well done, and congratulations from us on that. In terms of the actual site, so if the executive approves the paper tonight, and I think you should, I think the residents are going to be getting a better quality of home. But for me, that's a key site, with my Thatcham hat on, right in the heart of the town centre, and also right in the heart of public ownership. So for those members not aware, you know, there's the town hall, the library, the doctor's surgery, and the memorial hall, and playing fields and sports parks, and the cricket club, all within that envelope. So I really plead that the council come and speak to the town council when they're looking at any options on that piece of land, so that we get the best value for the whole community out of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dillon. Councillor Bridgman, do you want to say anything to that?
No, I thank Councillor Dillon for his comments, and clearly Sarah's in the room to hear them, and I'm sure she will pass those on to staff both homes and indeed staff in ASC generally. So far as the building's concerned, that happily for me is out of my hands. That's a question for others. I'm simply dealing with the transition piece. I will leave it to members of the property side to have those discussions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to echo what's been said about the continuity and the move, and it's been vitally important that I'd like to just say I'd like to echo the words of Councillor Dillon and Bridgman about the continuity and the care that's been taken to accommodate the move and the best interests of the residents. I think that's vitally important, especially given COVID and the fears that family members may have around that. I just have, with the closure of Walnut and the potential for growing demand in dementia beds, certainly affordable dementia beds locally, what forecasting and planning has been put in place, modelling, if you like. I'd like to ask Councillor Bridgman what's been put in place to ensure that residents of West Berkshire get the best value for money, and the council itself gets best value for money moving forward.
Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you. I think I take you to the start of the report. The second part of 1.2, I'll read it. A far more substantial piece of work is being undertaken to set out a medium to long-term plan for our wider care home provision. And that is the case. Other work is going on in order to determine what the council's position in the market should be, what our provision should be, and you will see that come forward in due course. And I don't think that will be in the far distant future, because it's something that we need to concern ourselves with. At the moment, the modelling numbers don't show that there is an immediate pressure to find, as I said, Birchwood has spaces in it. Even once all the Walnut residents are moved across, Birchwood will still have spaces, and there are spaces in our other homes. So they're not full, and therefore we do have some capacity, but we are doing work around that, and that will be brought forward in due course.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, everybody. As I said earlier, we're not actually going to put the recommendations at this point until we've had the part 2 discussion. So that actually concludes the business of the special executive, and I can now close this particular meeting and we can reconvene the ordinary executive. So moving back to the ordinary executive, we can move on to item 7 on your agendas this evening, which is members' questions. And first of all, I'd like to thank all those members that have submitted questions for this evening's executive. Please note, in accordance with the new process, you'll not need to say, I asked the question standing in my name. Your question will appear on the screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. You will then be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question, but please remember that this is to clarify the response provided and not to introduce any new business. In accordance with paragraph 5.12.9 of the Constitution, where questions have more than one answer, where questioners have more than one question, only their first question will be answered. If after all other first questions have been asked and answered, and there is sufficient time, we will answer subsequent questions. Please note that the time limit for members' questions is restricted to 60 minutes. And if your questions have not been answered in that time, you will receive a written response within 5 clear working days. The responses given either verbally at the meeting or in writing will be published on the Council's website. I therefore move forward with question A and invite Councillor Hilary Cole to answer Councillor Jeff Beck's question A on the agenda. I believe is Councillor Beck here, and is he in the room, Clerk?
I'm here and in the room.
Fantastic, thank you, Councillor Beck. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for your question, Councillor Beck. To answer your question, there is no need for any additional hostel provision this winter. Do you have a supplementary question?
Could I ask you the provision which is being provided and is likely to be provided? Will this be substantially provided within West Berkshire?
Yes, it will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. Can we move on then to item B, question B on your agenda this evening, and ask that the question from Councillor Abbs is put to Councillor Cole?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Abbs. I'm answering this question because it's really a planning issue. Conservation areas exist to manage and protect the special architectural and historic interests of a place. In other words, the features that make it unique. And within conservation areas, certain permitted development rights have been removed. In these cases, planning permission is required. A certificate of lawfulness is essentially a means of obtaining a decision from the planning authority that a proposed use or works do not require planning permission. An application for a certificate of lawfulness can be made to establish conclusively that a proposed use of land or some operational development, such as the installation of solar panels, is lawful and will not run the risk of future enforcement action by the planning authority. It is not compulsory to apply for a certificate of lawfulness, but it does give an applicant reassurance that the works they wish to carry out are lawful for planning control purposes. So in asking residents within conservation areas to apply for a certificate of lawfulness, the planning authority is suggesting that before residents spend thousands of pounds on installing solar panels that might be refused planning permission and have to be removed, they check first. We also ask the same residents who reside in the area of outstanding natural beauty, who also have restricted permitted development rights. And I'd like to take the opportunity to direct you to Historic England, who have produced some excellent technical advice and guidance notes, such as energy efficiency and traditional homes, carbon in the historic environment, and energy efficiency and historic buildings, which may be of interest to you. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Cole. Well, obviously, what you've said makes perfect sense to a large extent. As far as there are examples across, well, at least one example I know of, which we can go into detail individually after this, if you wish, where effectively the resident has been asked to, already told that they need to get a certificate of lawfulness, and because they're basically they're at in fact at the appeal stage. But right next door, I mean, I think 3 houses away, in exactly the same estate, in exactly the same area, there is already another building with effectively the same type of solar on it. And this leads me to a bit of a problem with connectivity and the messaging we're giving out by our officers, etc., not really recognizing what else has already gone in the area. Just taking Market Street for the moment as an example, where we replaced solar. If we look at Highway Copse, where it failed to deliver solar when it was meant to, and then we have the overall perception that's being given out to the public is that after 18 months, we're not really that serious about climate strategy and the emergency that we declared. So I'm really hoping that you can, if nothing else, if you can't answer the question of why it happened and why the officers are saying what they're saying, that you could at least use your position and portfolio along with the Councillor Steve Wallace portfolio to push further and get the departments connected together so we have a single deliverable, perception that yes, we are serious about climate change, and yes, we are going to allow things like solar on bog standard.
Councillor Abbs, is your question why the two different houses were treated differently?
That's part of the question.
Is that your supplementary question? Councillor Cole, are you able to answer that?
To be honest, Leader, unless if Councillor Abbs would like to give me the details outside this meeting, I can certainly investigate that, but I don't know what the cases are and I can't give you an answer at the moment. But what I would like to reassure Councillor Abbs is that in our emerging local plan review, we have got a new policy which is entitled responding to climate change. So we are mindful of the environment strategy, and it's referenced in our new local plan, and all will be made clear when the local plan goes out for consultation at the beginning of December.
Provide those details.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Can we move on then to item question C, which is Councillor Masters to Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Leader. So in the year to date, so 2020 to 21 to date, the council's paid £75,860 to the CAB as part of the core service level agreement. The emergency food and essential supplies grant of £103,000, 83,000 has been allocated specifically for the collaboration with the CAB, and we've reserved 20,000 on top, so 103 in total, as a contingency for emergency food linked to COVID alert levels and clinically extremely vulnerable residents. We've not provided direct funding to our local food bank during this period. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes. What's the sort of timeline for applications for assistance through the CAB for vulnerable families who are in crisis? Is it 1 hour, 5 hours a day?
I'm not sure what the operational capacity is of an individual CAB advisor, but those families who are in need of direct assistance, I would urge them to contact the Community Support Hub in the first instance so that they can be assessed and matched with the help that they need for their specific circumstances, whether that's going to the CAB or the food bank or anywhere else. But thanks for your supplementary.
Thank you both. Can we move on to item F on the agenda then, or question F, which is Councillor Brooks to Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks again, Leader, and hello, Councillor Brooks. Hope you're well. I've got quite a lengthy answer, so bear with it, Councillor Brooks, but hopefully it's nice and detailed for you. So the majority of the work, has to be said, to assist businesses with preparations for the end of the transition period is being done by national government, of course, through the Department for International Trade, BEIS, the Treasury and HMRC. That said, we are supporting those efforts at the local level, as you would expect. So officers in our economic development team and public protection partnership teams, actually, they've been working with various partners, including the Department for International Trade, as I said, the LEP, CBB, LEP, the other Berkshire local authorities, the Economic Development Company and more, really to make sure that businesses have the information they need to make preparations for the end of the transition period. That includes providing advice on licensing and changes to import and export legislation directly to affected industries. We have been signposting businesses to government documents, events and webinars as well, where relevant. We do fund various outside bodies, and through those partners' work, we are contributing to the development of preparedness levels among local firms. For instance, the week before last, the EDC, so the Newbury West Berkshire Economic Development Company, they hosted a Brexit event that brought together the Growth Hub, Federation of Small Business, the Chamber of Commerce. Actually, our Economic Development Manager and our Chief Executive were instrumental in putting together that event's agenda and promoting it to local business networks. It was actually very successful. A number of businesses provided really good feedback on its value. I'm nearly there, Councillor Brooks. Aside from that, the emergency planning team, they are very active in the Regional Resilience Forum, and our internal steering group meets fortnightly to share intelligence and to track any work that might be necessary at local authority level. I know the leader is involved in that. I can see her nodding away there. So we want to ensure as far as possible as well that our own services can continue to operate without disruption in the run-up to the end of the transition period and thereafter. There you go, Councillor Brooks. Sorry for the length, but do you have a supplementary?
Delighted for the answer. Thank you very much. A lot of it seems to be signposting, and I get that because there's a national dynamic here and imperative on national government so to do. But would you think that the website, our website, is robust enough to provide that signposting, to provide basic information? And should there not be some sort of paperwork, brochureware, something that goes out to local businesses saying, if in need, come to our economic development team? What are we doing? Are we responding purely to inbound? And I know we're not, because you said we're not, but are we in danger of responding to inbound inquiries, or can we push out? You understand the difference I'm making, Councillor McKinnon. Can we push out through our website and through a media and communication program a bit more than we are?
Thanks, Councillor Brooks. I think you, in that supplementary there, you touched on it. I mentioned in my first answer that we are working with various other partner organisations who are absolutely doing that. They're pushing the information out, whether it comes from a West Berkshire Council email or not. I seem to recall we got a bit of criticism for putting some Brexit awareness stuff on emails last year. So if you've come around to that, then that's, well, not you personally, but that's progress. So yeah, I do think the website is robust. I would expect as we approach the end of the year, maybe the inquiries to come through. I believe there is an email bulletin going out this week directly to businesses that have signed up for it. So thanks for being on top of it. I wouldn't expect any otherwise from you, but yes, I've got every faith that we're on top of it.
Thank you both. Can we move therefore to item question H, which is Councillor Andy Moore to Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks again, Leader. Sorry.
We're keeping you busy this evening.
That's okay. I think this is the last one, isn't it?
Yes, I think you're right.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. Right, the Newbury Town Centre study, the communications and engagement strategy is currently being finalised, so it's not finished yet. It will absolutely include engagement with ward members and the Town Council and other key stakeholders. We've mentioned the LEP already, and the Economic Development Company as well. And I'm sure that you, your fellow ward members and the Town Council will be able to feed into what I'm sure will be an excellent piece of work. I've used the word excited a lot tonight, but I'm really excited about this piece of work as well. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you for that, Councillor McKinnon. Yes, I do. The Newbury Town Council's formed a town centre working group. Will the executive ensure that all the relevant officers support the working of that group as a high priority?
I don't think it's for me to respond on behalf of the executive. It's the very first time I've been aware of that working group, Councillor Moore. If I have more details, then I'll be able to answer that question at another time.
Thank you both. Can we move on to question I on the agenda then, which is Councillor Macro to Councillor Wollaston. Councillor Wollaston? Councillor Wollaston, can you unmute yourself? I think if you're talking, nobody can hear you.
I'm so sorry. I thought I was unmuted already. Obviously not. My apologies. Thank you, Councillor Macro, and happy to let Councillor McKinnon off for a little while now. The Council refers residents to the West Berkshire Food Bank through some of its frontline services, such as housing, adult social care, and children and family services. But these referrals, which constitute information and advice, are not always recorded within our systems. A further route of access and referral to the food bank since March is through the community hub. But again, this will be one option provided to the resident rather than the only option. It's difficult to provide an accurate figure in respect to referrals to the West Berkshire Food Bank, However, the following data, which we do hold, should provide insight into the current position. The number of food requests recorded within the community hub as signposted between the 8th of April and the 31st of October stands at 139. However, this could be a referral to a community group or to the food bank. Over the course of the last 3 months, the housing service have short signposted or referred 23 residents to the food bank. Previous referrals, unfortunately, were not recorded. During the current financial year, Children's Services have made 109 referrals to the food bank. During the current financial year, Adult Social Care have made 43 referrals. Many of the food banks, including Lambourne Junction in my ward, pride themselves on a no questions asked basis to those in need, so comprehensive statistics are just not available. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Macro?
Councillor Macro, I'm going to say the same to you. If you're speaking, we can't hear you. You need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Sorry, the unmute button just would not work. I have many times I clicked it. Well, thank you for that. And I can understand that perhaps you don't have the comprehensive statistics, but it does sound like there's been quite a large number of referrals. But in a previous answer, we were told that the council has not made any financial contribution to the food bank. Could I ask you to review that, especially since government ministers have repeatedly said that the government grant was given out in partly to help make sure that people did not go hungry?
To answer, I suppose, I visited the food bank at Greenham Business Park a few weeks ago and was seriously impressed by the organisation. Whilst I was there, Tesco were there arranging a further food drop, and all the major supermarkets are making the same contribution. Greenham Common Trust have made the accommodation free. To my mind, this is the voluntary sector supported by the private sector and working with the public sector absolutely at its best. I can but commend every person and organisation.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. We can move on then to question D, which is going back to Councillor Masters and is to Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Councillor Masters. 11 families received direct support through the Community Support Hub during half term. 28 families contacted customer service and were referred directly to the council's partners for support, and 4 families made contact with the council's family hubs. Would you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. The feedback I've been getting on the ground is that the referral through the Citizens Advice, and this is from professionals across the district and the volunteer groups, is that the process is too slow and not reactive. And many of the people who are in dire need go directly to other voluntary services, such as the baby bank, the food bank, through because referrals for assistance via the CAB is going to take far too long when a family is in crisis. How can the council address that?
What I can tell you is that we have absolutely no evidence there's been not been sufficient food available for children and families in West Berkshire. I'm trying to think how I can sort of address that question, Councillor Masters. We think we're doing the absolute best we can.
Well, I would say, I helped set up a school meals facility at the Riverside with a couple of local chefs, and they fed over 40 people 40 families each day through their goodwill. Surely we should be addressing that head on and not having to depend on the voluntary sector.
I think that is a secondary question, Councillor Masters, but I will answer it. I mean, I think this is a classic example of just how well the voluntary sector works. I mean, we've all been so impressed during COVID at just how well the voluntary sector have risen to the occasion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wollaston and Councillor Masters. Can we move on there to question G, which is Councillor Brooks to Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Brooks, for your question. In the period from March, there have been 5 applications for change of use. 3 of the applications were approved within 8 weeks. 2 were subject to an agreed extension of that time, and approved within additional 6 weeks and an additional 10. Should be stressed that these extensions were agreed with the applicants, and none of these change of use requests were in relation to placing of tables or chairs. In anticipation of that and for completeness, I'll add that tables and chairs licenses on the public highway are subject to a separate application process, which has been brought in specifically to fast track applications following the initial lockdown period. On receipt of an application, the council has 10 working days to consult on and assess the request and respond to the applicant. Otherwise, the application is deemed to be approved. Therefore, I can assure you that any application that we received has been determined one way or another within 10 working days. I would add that officers have been very proactive in contacting businesses to help and advise with the application process and to ensure that as many as possible provide the correct information first time. Some of the information that we have received has varied somewhat in quality, and it's not surprising. There is a vast range of businesses that are applying and experience in doing that sort of thing. But I think the officers have done a sterling job to turn around the applications that they've had and improve the situation for as many of those businesses as possible. Do you have a supplementary?
I'm grateful for that. I'm not sure you'll know how many have asked for that rapid, not change of use. You use the term better than me, but you know, the pavement seating and the rapid adaptation. I don't know if you know how many had applied for that, but again, I will ask you similarly to Councillor McKinnon. Do you think the website is very clear to people who wish to get that extension into using seats and tables outside? Do you think that's clear and helpful to them so that they don't experience the sort of delays you just described, where they get an application incorrect and suddenly the 10 days is extended? Could you help me with that?
I can, yes. Well, in part, I can't answer the first part of that question on volumes. I'm afraid I don't have that in front of me, but I'm happy to get that looked up and confirm that to you, of course. What I can say with regards to the second part of your question is that there was a lot of exchange of information between officers to make sure that we had what we consider to be a comprehensive FAQ in essence, which was available on the website, and that is something that was also put out in general comms, in press releases. So it was there for a link to be able for people to be able to go to directly to help them in doing that. I'm not aware of well, no, let me change that slightly. We did make some updates to it. So I am aware of some things where we felt it could be slightly better, and that was addressed very, very quickly. I'm not aware of any long-term issues that were not covered within those FAQs. So I'm comfortable that we put out a good set of information for people to be able to do exactly what you've said.
Thank you both. And we move to our final members' question of the evening, which is question E, which is Councillor Masters to Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Masters, for your question. During half-term week, the contact centre took 5,155 calls with an average wait time of 32 seconds. For the sake of completeness, I believe we actually contacted you to just clarify your question, and actually your question was more, I think, about the calls that were made to the community hub number. So that I think is what you were referencing in terms of helpline. So for the sake of completeness, the community hub number took 39 calls and there was an average wait time of 3.9 minutes. Do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you very much, Councillor Stewart, for your very concise and detailed answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody. That concludes our members' questions for this evening. So thank you to all of those that submitted and all those that answered. We now move to item 8 on our agenda, which is the exclusion of the press and the public. So I'd just like to ask members to agree by raising their actual hand that the press and the public leave the room in accordance with Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972.
That's carried, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could just wait for one moment while Phil confirms that recording has stopped and we're stopping the live stream before we go into our part 2 discussions.
Yes, Leader, I'm just doing that now.